Granblue Fantasy Relink was a game I was looking forward to playing in 2024. A year prior, I first played Granblue Fantasy Versus for PlayStation. I ended up going to a convention and Xseed/Marvelous had a booth there. With some research on what games would be available for purchase along with the interesting collector's editions, I got this game which had a collector's edition for sale. I played it that spring and I love the mechanics and RPG elements that the game has been using. Plus, I love the art and aesthetics. I heard of the game having a community, and I was honestly shocked since I never heard of it until recently. And they just announced an action RPG for modern consoles. With what I have experienced with Versus, it should be the same thing for here. It was the last game I was going to play for spring break after experiencing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and the short Silent Hill game. Even before this, I knew what the game was going to be from watching a VTuber play the game. After finishing the game, it was disappointing. This ranges from a story that expects you to know certain games, along with a repetitive combat system that doesn't add much. I think it would be interesting to explore the game in a larger scale to help convey my thoughts better. So let's relink ourselves to Granblue Fantasy Relink, a disappointing adventure. A big chunk of my problems come from a sad and pathetic story. Some may say it's not that bad, but it's just saving the princess story with a generic save the world plot with a mommy milker wannabe for a villain. On paper, it's standard. The issues come from how they expect you to know the story from the mobile game the series is based off of. They really expect most of its players to come from a forgotten mobile game that nobody in the audience will ever play, because a game for consoles and a game for smartphones is a completely different, and given that this is a completely new game. Introducing people to this franchise is important to have success or to lure people in. They have fighting games like I mentioned with Versus, but they don't matter from what I've heard. Even with newcomers, you should have a story so far section if you really think this direction would work. Plus, the characters go through no development, which is also a factor of longevity. Why should I care for these characters if they don't have any sort of development? People will say the Fate episodes is where you can learn more about them, but they are just side content and are easily skippable if you know what you're doing. The protagonist, whether you chose Gran or Jadetta, will become a yes person and have the most straightforward thinking of life, making them more robotic than human. You also have unlockable characters, which add zero purpose to the story whatsoever. Also, this dragon thing belongs to a Leapfrog product. But what I've been thinking about is they expect you to play meaningless mobile games to understand what's happening. I did a review of Batman Arkham Knight, and that game follows a similar story beats to this game, but at least you have other games on that same console, and it's intended to be the third game. Granblue Fantasy Relink wants you to play a mobile game that is not on consoles and expects you to know what's going on. Most people who will buy this game will not play that mobile game, and the developer should have known this when making the game like this. Let's move on to the gameplay because I don't want to ramble about this. This is an action RPG that feels more like a hack and slash than anything else. Because the plot expects you to know what Granblue is. You start off with 6 characters, and then they have these cards to unlock characters that are fundamentally better than the starting lineup. Each of them have their own playstyle that feels fast-paced and extremely powerful to use. This doesn't help that they have an overly complex skill tree system that you can get a bunch of points for, which I found to be quite nice. It's much better than what is usually presented, and I'll also mention that when you get the new characters, they are always so underleveled, but it doesn't really matter if they are underleveled as long as they have the abilities to go into action and go on a massive winning streak. You can have up to 4 characters on a team, but it's actually just 3 because it's required to have the protagonist in there some way, shape, or form. Outside of the general combat, you have plenty of other stuff you can upgrade, such as the weapons, which remind me of Honkai Star Rail, with how to increase their level power, which can be pretty satisfying. The game also has side quests, which once accepted and have the materials, then you're going to hit the jackpot. It also has those Fate missions I've mentioned, which is just story fluff and an occasional mission or two. There's also additional missions for grinding as well, but they don't really have much to say. And finally, I want to touch on the boss fight. They could be fun or whatever. You can literally be underleveled and overpowered against these foes, which adds to the over-the-top combat system. But a few massive issues that come across this game is that it can get repetitive at the end, which lowers my thoughts overall due to just not much outside of its chaotic combat system. And you can only play one character at a time in a 4-member party system, I think ruins the potential of what could be an overly competitive game. I'll briefly mention the presentation. The graphics themselves are very pretty to look at with its vibrant colors and textures. Some stuff, such as the final boss, looked pretty. Performance was mostly decent with a few hiccups, but since it's a chaotic game, it makes sense. And the soundtrack is forgettable at best. All themes do the same thing as in other games, but they don't have the same impact, and it's just there because music. But I'll just wrap it up. I think the game as a whole is good and I recommend it if you have the money. But the ending shit for the story is just dull and repetitive with some missions just there. But returning to the title of the video, I think the game overall could have been much better if they made the gameplay more engaging and a story that would be better for everyone, not just those who played a cell phone game. I would wait for a price drop and you'll like it for a weekend. It's fine, I guess.